So, hello everyone, I'm joined by my good friend Gheorghia, and we're going to be asking or answering a few questions on development, the great and noble IMF, and other world institutions. Gheorghia has a degree in economics and international development and a master's in international tourism and development. So, if you need holiday destinations, Gheorghia's the person to ask.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get on to the questions. So, I was asked by my friend, the great man Subi, about some of the things around free trade and leaving the EU post-Brexit. So we're going to assume that it's a Canada-style deal, because if it's WTO, then it's not going to be fun times for anyone. But if we ignoring the divorce bill and all of that stuff, so from what I've seen of the CETA deal, there will have to be border checks. The BBC and other fact-check organisations say that there will be potentially border checks within the Irish Sea. I can bring that up. Stephen Barclay, the Brexit minister, said there will be minimum targeted interventions designed to prevent, for example, the trade in endangered species. So what that means is there's going to be border checks, there's going to be admin problems. So it's not going to be frictionless as it is now. And that's between the UK and Northern Ireland and also potentially the Republic of Ireland. So there will be border checks, even though Johnson says that, yeah, don't worry, call me and I will deal with the problems. Simply not the case. So, what do you think some of the implications of that is?
So first, border checks means that it means more checking, and now with the amount of imports, exports that the countries do, we need scanner machine or X-ray machines, which we know are a lot of money. So this will cost the country. As we discussed with you before, it takes time to install them first, to check them. So it's not just 1 year; it will take time. So in order to start working, I guess human power will be used. So it means more people have to be hired for the frontiers and for customs to provide this check-in. So again, it means extra work and also extra training. First, do we have enough people that know how to do this within UK, or shall we hire someone external from our country to show us how to do this? So it will cost some money, it will cost some time for sure.
And if we look at the Norwegian-Sweden border, we can see that it takes around 20 minutes. The average wait time for each truck is 20 minutes until they're back on the road. The border length is about 1,000 miles, which is quite long. And so this includes 20 minutes. This includes roughly 10 minutes waiting time, 3 to 6 minutes of handling time, and the time spent off the road. So what that means is that it's decent, but it's not as good as it is now. You need people checking them, and if there is any problems, then your truck's off the road and you're going to have to wait a good few hours, unlike it is now. I mean, they do check stuff on occasion, but generally it's pretty efficient. And if we look at it, I did see it somewhere. Where is it gone? I think it's 10 times the amount of trucks come through Dover and Calais compared to Norway and Switzerland.
Again, the UK's population is much higher than Scandinavia.
Yes, and we buy a lot more things as well, so it says.
Yeah.
The main border crossing at, I can't pronounce that word, it's one of the customs shows. Norwegian words are hard. So they deal with 1,300 heavy goods vehicles every day, which is less than a tenth of the number that passes through Dover. So we're going to need a lot more lanes, a lot more scanners, and a lot of people to deal with this.
Maybe extra points, maybe extra customs to be opened.
And this is going to be a lot of money.
That will cost.
And so taxes. Where's the money going to come from? That's what they say to every left-wing thing. So I asked the honourable gentleman Boris Johnson, where will the money come from? Because it's going to cost a lot, and we still have to pay the divorce bill if the withdrawal agreement goes through. So that 350 million not going to help in this situation, even though it's not even that amount for a start. So yeah, that's a big problem. And even if we do sign a CETA agreement, as we discussed a couple of minutes ago, you can put quotas on these things. So the CETA deal means that EU exports on cheese to Canada is raised from 18,500 tonnes to 31,972 tonnes. So anything over that gets hit with a tariff.
Yes, so it means that the consumption will be affected, and definitely the prices. So people will either have to substitute what they consume, or they will have to cut and substitute with just another material, other things to eat, if not cheese.
and tariff-free quotas on corn is limited by the EU, so it was raised from 0 to 8,000 tonnes over 5 years, and obviously these things can change because of the nature of the agreement. So I've got the numbers in front of me, but I'll just read some out to you. So like we discussed earlier, road vehicles, we export £17 billion worth of road vehicles, and we import £46 billion worth of road vehicles. So say, for example, if the EU wanted their vehicles to be more competitive within the EU, they can stick a quota on that.
Yes.
And they're obviously the bigger power, and they can sell more cars domestically, more cars built in Germany. And obviously it works the other way around as well. But that means manufacturing will be reduced definitely. So then they'll just cater to the domestic markets, which is both of us, really. Because if you think about it, Nissan in Sunderland, if they're like, oh crap, they're going to hit us with, a 10% tariff over a certain amount of cars exported, that means we can't export that many cars. So we're going to move to Portugal, somewhere nice,
But you can look from another point of view. Because UK imports more than they export in these terms, it means that actually the productivity can increase here. But again, depends what type of cars are demanded here. Because as you said, what is produced here might be wanted in Europe, and what is produced in Europe, people want here. So maybe they have to change some of the ways that they operate in to fulfill the expectations of the UK market.
And we have medicines here, so we import £10 billion worth of pharmaceuticals, and so that's how much we export, and we import £17 billion worth of medicines. And the thing with medicines are, if you change the certain types of medicines you take, even if they're within the same thing, so say like when you take antidepressants, one type of them, and then you have to substitute with another brand, it can cause you problems. Same with insulin as well.
It does, because these are how do you call them, hormones, and this affects the behavior and actually the reaction of the body.
And so what that means is that if quotas and things are put on, it's going to hit both of us, but it'll hit us a lot more because we import a lot more, and the EU do manufacture a lot of medicines. And there's some other things here like raw materials. It says petroleum and petrol products. So I'm assuming we import crude oil and then we export, petrol refined.
Yes.
Or diesel refined. So that could be problematic as well, depending on how things go. But the CETA deal isn't, this great thing that people talk about. And obviously the UK is a service-based economy mainly. We're not a manufacturing superpower anymore. And so the CETA deal does give access to some Canadian services. But the problem with that is that it's not total access like we have now.
Yeah. And again, services, it's big companies, but because it's services, it's not that expensive to relocate to any other country. Because
Which they've done.
Yeah, but if you have production lines, that's going to be a bit more expensive, that it will hit harder. But services, you can move it anywhere. A lot of phone calls centers are in East Asia now. So definitely can be relocated from here. And the hit will come onto UK.
And we've seen Sony Europe leave the UK as well. Just something I'll miss, because I do like Sony. They do some good stuff sometimes.
Mitsubishi or Nissan? Which of this one?
They've really kicked up a fuss. I think it's not Boeing, it's one of the plane manufacturers. They've left as well.
Yeah.
They were like, even two times like, oh, they're not going to leave, or we don't need them. And then they were like, okay, bye. And they went. And then I think Theresa May was going to offer Nissan a special kind of deal, or one of the Japanese companies, a special kind of deal. And they said that, look, we can't deal with this uncertainty anymore, we're going.
Yeah, they moved the production line.
Yeah, and so they moved back to Japan, because obviously the EU signed the deal with Japan. So some of it went back to Japan, which is quite interesting. But what we can see is that trade is obviously bilateral, and if anyone puts some tariffs on the other person, it can be problematic. But at the same time, we know that the WTO rules on tariffs are that if you set tariffs on one thing, it affects that one product regardless of where you buy it from, unless you have a deal in place. So say you put a 30% import tariff on lamb, that means any lamb you buy from, be it America, if there's no deal with America, and also say with Argentina, the tariff price is the same. And so if we put the tariffs to zero or put them at very low, why would you do a deal with a country that has 5% tariffs? You've given them already what they wanted. The whole point of a trade deal is to lower or get rid of tariffs.
Yes.
So what would be the point if we said, oh, we're going to lower our tariffs to zero on beef? That's going to make a lot of beef imports a lot cheaper. But then Canada say, look, you're giving us all that we wanted. Why would we do a deal with you? It makes no sense.
Yes.
And we can say, oh, we're Great Britain, we're the greatest country, and we should own you, and blah blah blah. But they were like, okay, who cares?
Yeah, it's history anyway. And again, what type of profit will it give to them? What's the point to do that if you're not gonna get anything back from that?
And so, you can see that a CETA deal doesn't solve all the problems. A no-deal Brexit would be.
It will be hit hard.
Both sides will be hit harder. It's just a question of who's going to get hit harder, and I think it'll be us. Because people like what they like. People buy. There's still the same things. Like the video I watched of the Canadian cheese seller. He was saying that one of the problems with the CETA deal was that because the cheese imports from the EU has increased, people are going to buy the same cheeses that they like from the EU, and it puts Canadian cheese manufacturers in problems.
Yes.
And so all the branded stuff we get from the EU, wherever it is, wherever wine, they buy, people like that particular brand, they're still going to buy it, essentially, even if the price does go up.
But it depends how much it will go up.
It depends, it depends, because I've seen some of the tariffs, 30-40% tariffs, which are insanely high.
So if let's say your favorite thing goes in price twice or 3 times, would you still buy that?
But the thing is, if we put the tariffs down, if the UK puts the tariffs down, that means you can still buy your favourite product from France. It's going to be cheap, it's going to be maybe slightly more expensive, but if you're, say, a French person who likes, red Leicester cheese, for example, if you put a 40% tariff on that, or 30% one on that, your cheese gone up in price. It's not going to compete with other cheeses. You might like the red Leicester cheese against Swiss cheese and French cheese and whoever else makes cheese, but if it goes up in price, are you going to buy it? It depends how much you like it, really,
And again, the income. I'm definitely sure that the income won't increase. So disposable income is the same. Things are higher in price. So it means people will look for alternatives that will give them enough money to buy what they want. Or enough to survive, in a way.
And we can see the impact of, doing a trade war and tariff war with the US and China, because the US has taken a major hit because China have hit them strategically. They've hit soybean farmers and they've struggled. And so for all his bluster, he's taken a massive hit on the great trade war, and the US is suffering for it because China can unilaterally say that, okay, we're going to end all imports of said product, say American soybeans, and no Chinese people can buy it because the nature of the government is very authoritarian. If I say you're not going to be able to buy this, you're not going to be able to buy it. But in America, even if they put, say, a 30% tariff on a Chinese-made product or a part, especially if that product or part isn't made in America anymore, you still have to buy it from China. You don't have a choice. And so what happens is the price gets put onto the consumer. So you're going to pay 30% more, or a certain price more, if said product goes up because of a tariff. And so that's the nature of tariffs and that sort of problem, where even if we do sign a free trade deal, it doesn't solve all the problems that we have now. And I think that answers the question of the implications around free trade. And obviously, there are problems with outsourcing, like we discussed with the NAFTA example.
Yes.
Of if you outsource cars, the manufacturing of cars from Detroit, which happened, it gets sent to Mexico. Then you've lost a well-paying, upper working class, maybe even middle class job if you're a manager at said car manufacturing place. And so that affects the local economy and also the wider economy. If said person gets a lower paying job, that affects their happiness and personal satisfaction, but also it affects how much the local economy gets through taxes. And
it's
obviously,
rotation.
yeah,
Circle.
if you have less disposable income, what that means is you're not be able to go out to eat, which or buy things or whatever, and it affects the local economy.
Yeah, because you're not consuming as much as you used to do before, so it affects the overall economy of the place where you live.
And I think that's one of the things that did Detroit in was the mercy. If you watch the 8 Mile film, you see Eminem, helping to manufacture cars, and also freestyling on some fools. But yeah, that stuff's gone or going, and Detroit is not the best place to live. There's a lot of gang violence and things there, and I think you can attribute part of that to the outsourcing of jobs, which has happened in the EU. I think the UK has lost some jobs because of outsourcing. I think it's like Slovakia or Slovenia is like the biggest car manufacturer in the EU.
Slovakia mostly.
Is it Slovakia?
Yeah. Skoda.
And Skoda, yeah. But at the same time, we've seen companies come into the UK, like Japanese car manufacturers come into the UK because...
And now gone.
Huh?
And now gone.
And now they're gone, yeah. That's not my point, okay? But my point is that because we have free trade with the EU, Japanese companies come in because of our low corporation rates and, the standard of living, whatever their reasons were. They've come in and they've set up shop here. And obviously now they're going.
Yes.
But that's not the point. My point being is that, it has lost some jobs in some industries, but also gained
Yes.
jobs from other places. You know,
Yes.
Sony Europe was here. Obviously that creates, you know, a decent amount of jobs. But now they're gone too. But I think that wraps up this question of, you know, the benefits of free trade.
Yes.
I think,
Yes,
you know,
it does.
and sort of the implications we're going to have now that if the trade war does break out,
It's to look at what details are in that trade,
Yeah.
as you said.
in
Is
the
that
CEO
quota?
agreement, yeah. And Canada aren't as big as an economy as we are, but our trade with the EU, I think, is far higher than Canada's trade with the EU even now. And so that's going to be on the table. And obviously, you have to get the trade deal through every EU country, and even smaller things as well, smaller like groups. And so, if there's no fishing rights on the table, Norway can say, "Sorry, bro, we're not." Can Norway veto deals? I think.
To do the.
Can Norway, like, if there's a trade deal, can Norway say no?
To be honest, Norway have a voice. Yes.
They have a voice.
Yes, they are. So
I see.
again, UK can follow very example as they do, but there are still quotas with Norway.
But like,
involved.
say if the UK were going to sign a trade deal with the EU, could Norway say no, we don't want this? The
No.
veto.
No, they're not part of the.
They don't have a
parliament.
veto, but they do have a voice, right?
Yes, they do.
But Sweden could. Sweden would like, don't worry.
Sweden, yes, Sweden is part of European Union.
We'll stand for our Scandinavia, but because obviously they have fishing.
Yes.
They have big fisheries as well.
Yeah.
So they might even not, you know, might not even care much about Norway. They could say that.
Sweden is actually a big player in EU,
Is
even
it?
if they're not very like famous for big actions or small actions. But they are quiet, but they do their job.
Powerful Nords.
Yes,
The Nords.
powerful and quiet.
Yeah, it's the most scary kind of person. But yeah, I think that covers it. Anyways, we're gonna ramble on far too long, and there's other questions to ask. And so there's the foreign aid question that I really wanted to ask. So is foreign aid, is it a good thing to do, and is it just a form of soft power and influence, or is it a genuine effort to help poorer countries? And so the example I gave you was the Marshall Plan, which was done during the Cold War, where the US would just throw money at countries in the hopes to keep their economies alive, to stop, you know, the radical commies taking over. So what do you think? Do you think it's, obviously the UK is a big player in foreign aid, the US, other countries, is it for soft power, or do you think it's a genuine help of helping poorer nations?
I'll start with a good side. There are some good examples, let's say, when they help people in danger. For example, the disaster in Indonesia. International help was very welcomed because it came as without being known, and a lot of houses were destroyed, a lot of farmers suffered because the land was not productive anymore. So of course, in this case, international aid was very useful because it came from as voluntary and it came as grants as well. So that was a good thing. But however, I do not think that overall yet we have good results. If you look at the biggest part of the aid, it's actually going towards military. So let's say the latest one was the aid that came from US to Saudi Arabia, and how many millions it was?
Was that in foreign aid? Was that in foreign aid, or was that?
That was investment from US.
Oh, that's
Saudi.
foreign direct investment, isn't it?
Yes,
Slightly
kind of.
different thing, wouldn't you say? I think foreign aid is like when they give money to, like, say, India to help with, you know, I think I read one story, I did a presentation on it actually, where it was about helping pregnant, I think, Indian women through like childbirth and, you know, childcare. And the Indian leader at the time, I think it was a lady, she said that, you know, it's a peanut, and, you know, compared to how much we spend. And I was like, well, if you're going to be rude about it, you know, pay for it yourself, fool. You know. And it was like, it's kind of true because they spend a lot more, but it's about like the areas where you spend it, and obviously
there is, and again, look at Afghanistan. Is voluntary organizations that go there, they are saying about keeping the peace, but maybe if you're not there, maybe the peace will be there. So that's another point to make, like, okay, they invest money to keep the peace, and again, it's military peace. Do people really need that? Or maybe invest in a school or invest in some hospital?
They do that though. Like the UN, obviously they have schools in Palestine, Pakistan. I think one of the UN schools was attacked by the Taliban. I think that might have been the school Malala went to actually. It might have been a UN school. I'm not sure, but yeah. So like going to the question, do you think it's a genuine effort to help these poorer countries? So like it's like if you see someone, you know, is falling over, you know, you can go and help them out of the goodness of your heart, or you can think about it as, oh, if I help this person up, you know, everyone else is watching and they'll think I'm a great person. You know, do you think it's there for soft power, for influence? Yeah.
That's more for influence, in my
More
opinion.
for influence.
Yes.
So you have a more cynical view of it.
It's not cynical, but overall it's mostly to make them, in a way, to keep them not dependent, but to it helps to create that
Influence.
image of savior, West as savior, helping that poor people that don't know how to develop. Which
And also it can be used as a stick to beat the countries with. To say that, if you do this thing, then we're not going to help you. I think that happened with Suez. I think the US threatened to pull out aid to the UK, or they just said, if you do this thing, then we're not going to help you anymore. And then the UK was like, oh, sorry, bro. Yeah, Suez, we're out. And there's one of the biggest scandals in UK foreign policy, which is the Suez crisis. Have you not heard of that? No.
No.
Oh man, it's hilarious. So what happened was what was it called? There's a river that goes through Egypt.
Yes.
I think it is the one where the French built it, and it
You
was
mean the canal?
nationalised. No, not the Nile. It was
The canal.
I can't remember what it's called. It goes through.
I know.
It's called the Suez Canal.
Suez
How
Canal,
stupid
yes.
am I? Yeah, I just mentioned it. It's literally called the Suez Canal. It's the Suez incident. Oh, that was stupid. So, anyways, so what happened was Egypt went and nationalised the Suez Canal, and so the UK were like, "No, we can't be having that, bro." Like, because obviously we still need it. Because if they put, tariffs, a toll. That's the one. If they put a toll on ships coming through, which they did. It means that the UK's sort of manoeuvre through Egypt was just a shortcut, a massive shortcut instead of going all the way around Africa. We were like, no, I can't be having that, bro. So we went in there. It was like I think the plan was Israel goes into Egypt and then comes straight back out, creating like a not a military conflict, but like an incident, right? And so the UK was going to fly in there, but like, oh, don't worry, bro, we'll deal with this. We're the peace guys. And so they were going to try and kind of do something to take control of the Suez Canal. And then America were like, hell no, you come back right now. And we're like, oh, sorry, bro, we're going back. And it was Anthony Eden that was under, I believe. And we're not going to go into some of the stuff because he went, I think, quite crazy in the end. And I think Graham told me that it was down to some of he had a really bad stomach problem. Some of the pills he took, I think, weren't affected him mentally. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's an effect of soft power of the US saying we're gonna pull back aid if you don't stop doing this, and we're like, sorry, bro, I apologise. You see what I'm saying? And so I did see Bernie Sanders talking about Israel. It's like if Israel don't stop the settlements, then we might withdraw aid, like financial aid from Israel.
That's another point. Foreign aid.
Soft power, yeah. That's the question I'm asking about. Foreign aid. Of is it soft power? Is it to help poor people? I think it's pretty clear. It's there for soft power.
For soft power, and also because you said Israel, US invests in Israel's army. Israel is not a poor country if comparing with other countries of the world, but they are investing a lot of things in military.
Get this, they have like a single-payer health system in Israel. The US doesn't even have that.
You see?
It's crazy. So I think that answers that question. So we'll go to the next one, which is why have NGOs and charities not done more to help solve the food and education crises in places like Africa? So Africa benefits vastly from remittance payments. So remittance payments are payments from abroad by people, typically from the country. So obviously, apparently that with Bangladesh, mom sends some money back to Bangladesh to help out the fam. A lot of people do that, and obviously Africa is a massive beneficiary of that, of remittance payments. I think they make more. I think Mehdi Sam covered it where he said that Africa makes more from remittance payments than it does from charities, which is insane because no one ever talks about that. But my point being is that why have NGOs? Why does it feel like it's still an ongoing problem when you've got people like Akon, Drogba who can build schools and other things, and it feels like this the problem in Africa, the constant food crises, places like Sudan, which are really war-torn and among other problems. Why have NGOs not done more to help them? If you see what I'm saying?
To be honest, usually NGOs they work from, or they get the money from donations that people give. Let's say these big international NGOs as Oxfam, they get sponsored by people. First, try to just Google money that are spent on NGOs, where the money go. First thing, money will go into paying for the staff and for the campaigns and everything.
Media, advertising.
Yeah. Okay. Much of this money won't get to people. First, whenever they go, let's say, to a poor country in Africa, no one's gonna stay in like a simple hotel. They will definitely take a business class and will stay in a 5-star hotel. That's one thing where money go. Second, might be that they go with an idea to build schools, to build hospitals, but they will follow the Western standard and they will use medicines that are in Western world. However, going there, you need to ask what people actually need in that community. Do they really, like I was speaking with someone, do they really need English language? Let's say in their village no one knows English, and in that country. So in a way, going there to teach them English, isn't it something new as neo-colonization? So that's good, they go, they help, but is it real help? Do they really speak with people what they need there? Or they just come to try things that work for Western world? So I think they need to consider first to approach the locals, ask them what is needed there and implement what is actually needed. Second, if there is a help that actually works, it's on low scale and it's no one's going to talk about this. So I think the changes are being done by some NGOs for sure, but they're very small at the moment. So I guess like with more implication things will develop. And another thing about NGOs, why don't they help enough? Again, a lot of NGOs, they help military causes. So NGOs work in Afghanistan. Speaking about Africa, they work in war areas as Sudan. There was case with Somalia as well. Yes, they go help. They give, the donations go towards food as well. Again, maybe not enough to make sure that everyone has sufficient calories to survive. But a lot of this money go towards keeping the peace. But maybe you can use that money to help just the people. Why to go and show them how to keep the peace? Because if we look sometimes the wars, there is always someone that wins. And I'm pretty sure people from Ethiopia or kids, they don't have the money to get the guns that we know that some of them have.
Yes, there's a point a rapper Carla made. He's quite talented the way he said that, how do these people get guns when they don't make any?
Yes.
So obviously they're coming from somewhere, they're being imported from somewhere.
Yes.
I'm not sure where they really get them from, but it's a question that has to be asked of where these people are getting these weapons from.
Yes, so that's the thing, like you use the money to buy that weapons, because people there don't have the money to do that. They definitely were given, most likely from a developed country, how we call it. So that is the things which I ask myself about military thing, about the global, about the do you know the term Orientalism? So going to teach them how to live, how to be modernized.
Yeah, so Sam, I don't know if you remember him, Sam Lappin, he went to, I can't remember which African country he went to for summer to help him out, and he was saying that they were just like promoting like the ideas around capitalism and stuff like that, and I was like, serious? And he was like, yeah, and I was like, what the, how does that help any of these people?
Yes, how? That's the question.
Yeah, and obviously at the debate between two people in class, Glenn was saying that, how does it help, sending these kids, they send those Christmas parcels and stuff, like with shoes and stuff, and the point I made to you was that they don't, like, why don't we help them manufacture their own stuff?
Yes, teach them how to catch the fish, don't give them the fish.
Yeah.
So build a manufacturing place there. Invest a bit of money.
You don't even need to build like a goddamn factory. Like I was watching one documentary like years ago where they were like making clothes and things like that. They didn't have a product factory. It's just a room with some sewing machines, not like a sweatshop. It was a nice place. And so why don't they have these sorts of facilities there? And obviously electricity is a problem, but solar panels could come into that, or they could build something there to help them.
To build solar panels, if for example, because Africa is very rich in sun.
Yeah.
So this would definitely help.
Unlike England, which always rains, they have a lot of sunlight over there, and I'm sure there's other ways they could do, rivers, hydroelectricity.
Yeah.
Why aren't they building, more sustainable forms of, more sustainable, like things? If you see what I'm saying, like instead of giving them shoes or, like I said, the point to you was that they don't have some of these places, villages. They don't have anywhere to store food. They store them within clay pots, so bugs can't get to them. And then when it comes time to sell off these crops, they have to break the clay pots because they don't have proper storage. Some places do, but then you're at risk of flooding. And so why haven't NGOs actually given them a place to store their food properly? Like in America, they have those massive silos for like corn and things like that. Why haven't they been given these things? to help, because it does, yeah, we do give them Western farming tips. I mean, that doesn't work everywhere.
No, it again is the climate. What works here won't work
They're
there.
the people who know more about the climate. It's
Yes.
like when the first colonizers went over to America, and I think the Native Americans, what they do is they burn the land first and then they plant things. The colonizers were like, ha, stupid fools, why are they burning the land for? And then they realized that, wait, actually you have to do this because this is the nature of the land.
And that's why now in Bolivia and in Peru we are looking at implementing this as well. Finally, after 500 years, it got to
Or burning the land and then planting things.
Yes, going back to the original way that they were working with the land. And as you said, there are different conditions. They know better how to work. That goes to the idea to work with a community, ask what they need and implement what they actually need.
I remember when the Ebola scandal happened in Africa, and they took the bodies, I think, to be, it might have been cremated or something like that. I can't remember what exactly happened. And then obviously they have a process of dealing with dead bodies there, a cultural process. And then people were panicking, and they were saying that what are you doing? You can't take these. And it took the village elders to explain to people what was going on, because obviously you can still spread the illnesses. And so instead of actually talking to these people, explaining and talking to the village elders and going from there, because obviously there is a hierarchy in these places. And instead you go in there, you take these people, the bodies or whatever, or the people, and they don't see them for days, and people worry. And so if they think they have symptoms of an illness, they ain't going to talk to you. They're going to take you away to that, those white tents, and I might not get seen again. And it's just crazy how, instead of talking to the locals and understanding the lay of the land, we go in there with Western ideals and sort of, Western techniques that don't work.
They work in the West side. They work for example, for us UK, but they might not work in another part of the world. So that's a good thing.
It's important to ask them. So I think that
to adjust, maybe. Okay.
To adjust, yeah.
Yeah. You have the idea. You implement it in UK your way. Adjust it to our own way, to our culture, to our habits.
Okay, so I think that one resolves that question. So the next one is, what is the role of the IMF and the World Bank? What are some of the issues around them? Privatizing infrastructure in places like Greece and forcing austerity. First off, let's start off with who is the IMF?
So IMF is the International Monetary Fund, and World Bank, they give money in forms of loans or grants to countries that are endangered, or let's say developing countries. It's important
to remember it's not just developing countries, it's also
developed
countries as well. Obviously, the UK obviously had to take loans from, I think it was the IMF in the 70s.
That's the difference.
Boy, did that cause a lot of problems. But yeah, just anyone.
There's the difference between IMF and the World Bank. IMF gives money, grants, loans for economic in cause of like economic crisis or economic failure of a country. World Bank gives money more for a social side, so like development, if there is any environmental problem as well. And again, you've got other institutions as WTO, but that's another story. My thing about World Bank and IMF so far, I don't think it's a very good way they work. So first, as you mentioned, in 70s, and after that rolled on to 80s, was the oil crisis and debt crisis. We know that there were many countries which economy was nearly to bankrupt. Started with debt crisis in 80s with Mexico, as a domino effect in Latin America, Asia. In order to help these economies recover, what did they do? They did the SAPs, structural adjustment programs, which was just a document, even you can call it a blueprint for all the countries, with rules and new changes that they have to do, like in their countries, to overcome the debt that they accumulated throughout that decade. So we can see economically, a lot of austerity and the debt decrease. However, it came at the cost of privatization of health and education, and illiteracy rate increased in many countries. Like life expectancy in countries as Ghana has decreased throughout that period. So it always comes with a cost. So maybe, it helped economically, but what about the social side? Where people will get the money to go to school, to get treated if they have any illnesses? Also about the agriculture we're speaking. So that countries that are mainly agricultural, all the subsidies for the farmers were cut. So people had no motivation or even say incentives, money enough to invest in farming. So again, poverty increased. Income inequality. Many international companies went into countries as like Kenya, Ghana, even India to show how to work to people, of course. CEOs getting wages very high. People that were working, let's say if it's a petrol station, not station, but like company extracting. People that will extract that and will work around there are locals, which will get a wage just enough to go maybe on the daily basis or not even that. So again, it creates inequality. So I would say that it has to be revised the way that they work. So far, it creates more dependency of a developed world giving money to that poor countries. But again, looking at what they say sometimes is like, to specialize to export one thing. Okay, a country will specialize in exporting agriculture. Another one in technology. Technology is much more expensive than agriculture. So it already makes that country stay poor if it will export just, let's say, grain. And another one will export cars. And again, you can't make a country be dependent on just one thing of production. It has to have more sectors in case there is a economic
economic shock.
Economic shock. But country won't export anything, and it means collapse automatically, even if you're trying to help them. So for me, it's a bit creating, the term of neo-colonization.
Yeah, and so even if we talk about Greece, massive austerity was forced on them. And it was there to protect French and German banks, mainly, who invested in Greece, and their money would have been basically lost. That's one of the reasons why Greece was given loans in order to protect basically these French and German banks, right?
By IMF.
IMF, yeah.
But again, it goes like a domino effect. They get austerity, more austerity, more austerity. How much can a person support,
It's kind of similar to the Geddes Acts, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But what would have happened if Greece did default on its debt, which is another argument that I've seen that, the IMF loans weren't perfect, but if Greece defaulted on its debt, then what would happen then?
I don't know if it is allowed for a country to default.
You can default on that. I've seen some takes on it where basically it means that I think it means your interest rates will go up in the future, and organisations and countries won't want to deal with you as much. But it does mean that I think the debt is it's written off or something, because if you've defaulted, you've gone bankrupt as a country.
Yes, so you don't have how to pay it off. To be honest, I would say that it might work for them. It means that a new economic system is going to be put in place, everything new. And for Greece, it would be a good idea maybe. Because what they have so far, as I said, austerity. Okay, they cut one time, two times. But again, cutting, it means that people will spend less. They will be more likely to save. Again, no money in the economy. So economy will shrink even if you cut all the time.
There was not an interview, like a documentary I watched on Greece, where they said that 3 generations of one family are dependent on one person's pension, which is insane because pension amounts are very low in the first place. But unemployment is very high, and obviously if there's no money within the system, it does create a lot of problems, and austerity does do that way. It does take a lot of the money away from poorer people.
It does.
And if you're just about managing, it's not a great situation, but if you're struggling to pay rent or, payments, car payments or whatever, you lose your car, then potentially you could lose your job because how you're supposed to get to work, especially if you have to drive a certain amount of distance. So it does cause a lot of problems. Austerity in itself obviously has imposed a very strict form of austerity on Greece. Massive cuts on government spending, which is it's not a good situation.
The country got to a debt of 180% of their GDP. So
what does that mean when a country's GDP is gross domestic product, right?
Yes.
So what happens if a country is in that situation, 108%?
So GDP, gross domestic product, is the amount of production of output that the country makes within a year. So in 2011, I think it was 180. So it means that the country used the amount of money they had plus extra 180%. So let's say your country has 200, GDP is 200, and in order to survive you used 280% over, which would make in this case 560. So instead of using $200 overall, they used 560 to survive. So that means that this money they got from somewhere else, or just took them as an intern.
If you borrowed, borrowed money, yeah.
So that's what we mean when we say it's a percentage of debt, because like the debt that they have is kind of 180%.
It's basically simple terms. They've got more going out than they do coming in.
Yes.
It's simple terms, like,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
That's all I need to understand. What you're saying. So like, it's like it's kind of problem of, if you're spending too much, or your bills are higher than the amount of income you have.
Yeah.
It's kind of a more simple way of saying it. Like the country is spending more essentially than it gets in.
Yes. Like when you would say, I've got an overdraft of 80%, 180% of my income.
So regardless of all of the things that Greece produces, the tourism sector, where the Greek
olive
oil,
industry,
olive oil, extra Greek virgin olive oil,
yes.
and all of that stuff. Despite manufacturing all of these things, that so the amount that they bring in through sort of the taxation and things like that is the amount of debt that they've accrued over that year is far higher than the amount they made through taxation and other avenues.
Yes.
Is that how GDP works, or is GDP is everything the country produces, right?
Yes, GDP formula-wise will be tax plus investment plus consumption plus government spending.
Okay, so it's far worse than that, then, isn't it? It's far worse than a country spending more than it gets in through taxation. Is their debt problem is
sorry, not tax, net export. Tax is already part of government spending, because government money are the taxes that people pay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, government essentially. So what that means is if your debt amount is essentially higher than the country's GDP, it's far worse than if it's more they're spending more in whatever sector they're spending on, rather than the amount they're getting through taxes. It's everything the country produces.
Yeah.
It still doesn't amount to the amount of debt they have.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
That's what I was trying to get to. Yes. Okay. So it's crippled Greece, and I'm not sure. Are they doing better now than they were? I suppose it wouldn't be a massive achievement for them to do better than they were a few years ago.
No.
But it's because a once proud nation, the land of Aristotle and Socrates,
big people coming from there.
Plato and all the great philosophers, some of the greatest philosophers of all time. Especially Socrates. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Everyone pronounces his name differently, but a once proud nation, decimated essentially by essentially incompetent governments, and IMF and Germany were one of the key players in imposing a lot of the austerity as well, which is grim, really. You think other EU nations will look out for each other, but really Merkel's stuck a really big boot in there.
Yes, if Greece would go down or would default, the biggest player, the biggest economy in Europe for so many years is Germany. So this would have like a bad impact onto them.
I suppose they had to try and enforce something, because if the German banks took a hit, Deutsche Bank is very powerful, very, very powerful international player. And so if, the banks were taking a hit, they probably would have lobbied quite hard for some sort of intervention from, the powers that be.
Mm-hmm.
Because people love banks, well, elite people love banks. But so Greece was decimated essentially by an incompetent government and very harsh IMF loans, and obviously one of the problems austerity does cause is it can hinder not necessarily just economic growth, so like a country's GDP, but it can hinder income inequality.
It's already hidden there, and again the issue with Greece was that when European Union, you have to show your income, the debt of the country. All the governments were hiding it. And when a new power was coming, they, on the paper for European Union, they were putting a low debt. The country accumulated this debt for years, and it was just hidden behind the scene. And when the last government came, they were not able to deal with this anymore. So that's why they defaulted on, not defaulted, but
They had to take the loan. Yeah.
And announced the prices, and after that IMF came and said like, okay, you need to make these changes, so we give you the money, but you have to cut.
They did privatise ports, and I believe it was a big train station as well that they had to privatise in the end. So that's money that they can get in through selling off an asset, but at the same time it means that, say, some of the revenue that potentially comes through that port would be lost to the private sector,
Yes.
or whoever owns it. And also, how cool is it to own a port? Like, could you imagine owning your own port? That's crazy.
It's crazy, and again, is that person gonna pay the taxes?
Yeah.
The taxes were a bit cut not cut, but they were not increased that much for rich people. So again, goes to inequality.
Can't tax rich people, otherwise they'll leave. That's what the mantra is. We know that's not really true. So another question is, how can we do more to help evolving countries or developing countries, or should we just leave them be?
As I mentioned, there are two ways, good and bad side, anywhere. Good side, if there is a natural cataclysm or like disaster, to go and help internationally, it's good, because the country might not be able to the shock. For example, we can take a developed country that was hit, Fukushima in Japan. A lot of international intervention, and I think it was very welcomed. And in this way, countries have to sustain each other. But when it comes to, let's say, social change or cultural changes, even economical changes, sometimes it's just better to leave the country, because they know, like, social change, or like, let's say, about schools, education, people know what they need. So if it comes in form of a grant, it's fine, because you're going to actually help. But if you're going to give a loan to a country and actually put interest rate and actually putting some conditions on, how can it work? You made all these conditions to kind of keep them dependent there. So economically, definitely leave the countries alone if you're going to put all these conditions, all this interest rates, because it's impossible for a country to give the money back, as we see now. Still the issue with Ireland, still issue with Greece.
Yeah, there are still problems with Ireland, aren't there? That's kind of the thing no one talks about, because people just don't talk about it. Like, Ireland had really big problems not long ago, a good few years ago, wasn't it? 5 or 6, I think. Portugal also had problems.
Pig
Spain.
countries. Do you know pig? Portugal, pigs. Portugal,
that doesn't
Ireland.
That doesn't sound like a good
These
term.
are 5 countries that were hit. Pigs. Portugal, Ireland, Greece, Spain.
Okay.
So pigs countries. And Ireland is part of that.
Are they okay with this term?
Who knows? That's how it was called.
It's like, oh yeah, you're one of the pigs countries. Like, say what now? They could have come think better than that, I'm
Spain,
sure.
Portugal are getting a bit better.
Yeah, but Spain does have problems with Catalan independence.
Yeah, Catalonia, but it's another topic.
That is for another day. So we'll go to our next question: austerity versus Keynesian economics, the Geddes Acts, versus the kind of Scandinavian model, and we'll talk about UBI in a minute, universal-based income. But basically, the Geddes Acts, from what I remember Graham talking about it, which was basically like the British government would only spend what it got in the last year through tax receipts. And so what happened was, instead of the economy growing, the economy kept shrinking, because they kept getting smaller amounts in the next year, so they couldn't spend, so benefits were cut, essentially. And that was one of the major problems that they had, was they couldn't figure out how to. They thought that if we stop spending as much, then the economy will stabilise. Kind of like how a person, you get a certain amount in, you save some money, and you cut the amount you spend, and then you just hope that things balance out. But obviously, the country is very different, as we'll discuss in a minute. So that was the Geddes Act. So kind of the austerity model. Look, we need to cut the amount we're spending on things like social programs, welfare, purely because by doing that we'll save some money, and then we can put that towards the deficit or the debt. I think that's a pretty accurate model of austerity, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just cutting money from typically social programs.
Yeah. And paying the debt.
Yeah. Sometimes you can increase taxes as well, but that's something the British government haven't done, because they still believe in Reaganomics. Which I found hilarious, because Johnson was saying that we're not going to cut corporation tax rates from 17% from 19% to 17%, and it'll save the economy X amount. And then someone else in sort of underneath that tweet put that, wait, didn't you say that lowering the tax rate actually helps the economy and brings in more money? So haven't you just cost the taxpayer? And I was like, I love you, man. I was like, that's such a good answer. Because it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you cut the tax rate, then you unleash the power of businesses, and they do absolute madness, and then you get in more money through taxation, which is absolutely insane on the face of it. But so yeah, so essentially Boris Johnson has cost the British taxpayer there by keeping corporation taxes where they are. Apparently, if you believe in Reaganomics, and you're insane. But yeah, we'll talk about Keynesian economics, which is a big thing a lot of lefties talk about. So do you want to just explain it?
Keynesian economics is having both sides, so giving to people and giving to governments. Basically, it means government being owner of educational system, of health system, sometimes railways, and in UK would be railway mail, so like mailing things are in hands of government. But there are opportunities for people to open their business as well and operate. Usually in Keynesian economics, the tax is a bit higher because money gets more income, so they can invest in all these social and public services. And as you mentioned a lot today about Scandinavia works very good in this way because, for example, in Finland, tax can go up to like
60%.
Yes.
Very high, 60%, yeah.
But they have good infrastructure, they have education, they have very good health system. And to go to university is free there. Okay, people have to pass an exam, it's based on knowledge. And that's how you get there.
I definitely would not have passed the exam, that's for sure.
Yeah, but if you get there, it's free.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? It's you're limiting the amount that go, but the quality of graduates can be very high compared to kind of. I don't want to displace students, but I'm saying that it's very easy to get into university in the UK, purely because the universities make a lot of money out of it. It's in their best interest to have as many people in a class, compared to I think the Scandinavian model, which is just keeping the quality of graduate very high.
Yeah.
So the hiring process, if they see someone has a degree now, this kid might be actually smart, so we'll snap him up. But compared to now, a lot more people have degrees within the UK, which I suppose is a good thing. There's a lot more educated people out there, but at the same time, it means that the kind of the qualification itself is not worth as much.
Their unit is stronger. It's based purely on knowledge, like what people know. So yeah, I think that's Keynesian one. And austerity, as you said, is cutting from government spending, increasing people's tax to be able to kind of pay the debt of anything.
A key point in Keynesian economics is borrow in bad times and invest in the economy. So in the UK, we would improve the roads because the roads are terrible. We would improve the buses because the buses are terrible, and we'd improve the trains because the trains always are terrible.
They said that some changes are coming for trains.
I'd say a lot of things, to be fair. Boris Johnson said there's going to be no border checks in the Irish Sea, and then another time he said there might have to be checks in the Irish Sea, and then Stephen Barclay said, yeah, there will be some administrative checks in that border. So, they say a lot of things. The trains have been rubbish for a long time, so I don't really believe them too much. Someone made that point. He was like, oh, why would he say it if it's not true? I'm like, are you like 10 years old, or are you just very naive? Like,
it's what people believe.
I'm just like,
that's what I'm saying. People don't check media. They just look at the information and they absorb it without checking other sources.
So Keynesian it's mainly about you just borrow in the bad times, you invest it, and when your economy recovers, you pay off the surplus. And so another, I guess maybe it's not Keynesian economics, but Bush did a stimulus package in 2008 trying to avoid the recession. Obviously, it didn't work because we're in recession still. Oh, not in recession now, but there's still an economic downturn. And I think what he did was he gave $600 to every American family, or something like that. I can't remember the exact details. And what happened was it didn't work fully because people kept the money in savings. Because obviously, you don't want to lose your house. You're not going to go out and spend. So it didn't have the impact that he wanted. But at the same time, it meant that if you had any bills outstanding, you could pay them off, and you're a bit more stable economically. If you have car bills to pay, you can pay off and you can keep your car. And it helps your family stay above water, so you don't lose your house or your car, your ability to work. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then by doing that, you're not in the welfare queue essentially, because if you lose your car, you can't get to work. You've lost your job. Even if you're say out of work for 2 or 3 months, you're still going to have to be collecting welfare.
Yeah.
And so by Bush, spending, that $600, which isn't a lot in fairness, but say it does keep some people's heads above water. It means that they might not have to go into the job centre purely because they've managed to keep their mode of transportation. You see what I'm saying? I didn't have the desired impact because it's not a lot of money, for one thing, and the other problem was that people kept it in savings. So maybe there's a different way he could have given out the money. Anything like a voucher system or something where you have to redeem it or something. But then you have the problem with a voucher being looked down upon. But if everyone has one, it's not as looked down upon. So we talk about universal basic income quickly. So there's a guy in America called Andrew Yang. He was a big proponent of it. And any issue anyone said to him was like, "Oh yeah, UBI." It's so funny, trust me. And so the point of universal basic income is that every month you'll give everyone in the country, regardless of how rich or poor they are, a set amount of money.
Yes.
So that's where the universal bit comes in. So everyone gets it, even if you're me or if you're Richard Branson, a millionaire. And so the point of that is that it means that people you don't have to work as hard, for one thing, so you might be able to spend more time with your family, or you may work part-time instead of full-time, and you pick up a class, you go back to college, or maybe you go to university, who knows. You have options now, because now you're not as poor as you were, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you've got the universal basic income.
You got that big UBI, so what are your thoughts on it? Because obviously automation is happening, robots taking over jobs. See in Tesco's, there's less cashiers, there's all those machines, because they have typically one cashier between about like 10 machines or something like that. Or 6 machines, 7 machines. Like in Tesco's Express, there's what, 6 machines and one person, right?
Yes, usually like that now.
So instead of say you having 2 or 3 cashiers, you have one. So what do you think about UBI as a concept? Do you think it's too early for that now, or what do you think about it?
I don't know. It depends. It can put off many people, but also it's a guarantee for the others. So let's say with a bright side, technology, one thing, if there is a crisis and many jobs are going to be lost, the UBI definitely will be cut a bit, but still you will be assured that you will get some kind of income. And as you said, it gives more wish for people to go and invest in something, either in education, either buy some other things, again boosting up the economy. On the other side, it might put some people off, because someone might not work at all, stay home and get the same income. Other people, they might work part-time, maybe they work on 0-hour contract and there is not enough jobs. It's pretty hard to get a job, to be honest, these days. Anyway.
That's what you're telling me, man.
And try to imagine that you work part-time anywhere, you're getting some income and you're getting this UBI, which will help for sure. And it will put off, because you will see like, okay, why do I have to work then? They're gonna pay me. Why someone that is home gets money? And again, I think it can, if it's like that for generations and people don't work, it's creating a kind of, how do you say? So if I see that my mom didn't work, my kid would see that I don't work, so it will create a generation.
But at the same time, like UBI, when Yang was talking about, he's saying it'd be $1,000 a month. And so, say in England it was, say, £200 a month. It's not a lot, you can't live off £200 a month. But it means that, maybe you can buy a few more things that, maybe you can be like me and go on Amazon and buy random things, or whatever it is that you wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? Like UBI, if you do it like that, if you give people, thousands of pounds, a month, where, people don't have an incentive to work. But I think his point was that, it's not enough to live off, but it is enough where you can use the money for whatever you need to do, college, or
it's a support.
As a support mechanism, yeah, not as as an alternative to working. So I don't want to strawman Yang because he has a lot of fans on the internet. I don't want to get that hate, don't want it. But his point is that it's going to help people out.
But in this point of time, I think UBI is not very appropriate yet, because
until the robots take over.
Not robots. We're in austerity. Where will you get the money for that? So
you can do it through taxation and other means, because
taxes are already high, and people get.
In the UK they're not. They are high, but like you can still. There's still a lot left on the table, if that makes sense. Like, you still have obviously the big tax avoiders. There's a lot of money there. And so if it does help stabilise the economy, if people obviously put that money in the hands of poorer people, that can help bring up the economy, because then the people that typically don't have too much to spend have a bit more money now. So it's like the argument of Reaganomics. It's like if you give rich guys more money, they're going to go out and build more businesses or buy another mansion or something like that. But like I think one of the things I said too was a few weeks ago was that if you give another £1 million to Jeff Bezos, what's he going to do? He's got 4 mansions, I think, already. Is he going to buy a 5th one?
Most likely.
I don't think he would, because he's got enough money to build a 5th one now. He has enough money to, I think, eradicate poverty, and he'd still be a billionaire. Do you see what I'm saying? I think he has enough money to home. I think all the homeless people in America, he'd still have billions. So giving him £1 million is chump change.
It's how much is going to be appreciated. That's
the point, isn't it? And if you give the money to poorer people who, say even if they spend it on paying off their mortgage or something like that, that means that in the long term they're still going to have more money to spend elsewhere. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but going back, if you increase the tax, so it means maybe the tax in terms of money would be about 200. So if you give a UBI in terms of 200, I don't think it's that worth it. You might just go and increase a bit the tax for rich people then, and the money that will be extra give to poor people. So in this way inequality goes down as well, and poverty. Instead of changing everything, increasing tax for everyone and giving everyone £200, which...
Isn't that kind of... So you're saying, tax richer people and just give the money?
Yes.
But then the problem with that is it will be attacked, if that makes sense. So like, with the universal thing, it's much harder to do damage to it, because everyone gets it. Even if, like you say, you're rich and £200 is chump change to you, it's much harder to damage. Like the NHS is universal. If it was just for poor people, it's much easier to say that I don't benefit from this, who cares, I don't want to pay national insurance. But it's much harder to attack universal programs than it is to attack, one specifically for the poor. In America, it's very, it happens very often, where they attack, care programs for poorer people. And I think Medicare is one that they always attack, but that's for like over 65s. But they're always going after social programs, if that makes sense.
Again, might be another point. Why to give extra £200 to rich people? You might get that argument as well.
It's true, because the point is that they don't need it.
Yes.
You
just made the point about 1 million.
So I suppose it'd be interesting to see that one play out, because Yang's a big proponent of it, so it'd be interesting to see how he argues that, because he's a lot more intelligent than I am. But anyways, we'll go on to a more fun question.
Yes.
Who is the bigger threat to their domestic countries and the international stage, Boris Johnson or his idiot clone, Donald Trump?
Speaking about the inside, like in the
country... So we'll go, domestics first.
They kind of have an equal... impact on the countries. So, for example, both of them are anti-migration. Both of them are for, make UK great, make US great. So for working like inside the countries and putting tax and quotas on all the other exports. So we see UK with EU and we see US with China. So in this way they are pretty much the same to the country. They present the same kind of threat or even opportunity, might be, who knows. But externally I would go with Trump. Trump and America, they had a bigger military influence in the world first. And second as well, they, in terms of just the size of the country and the population, how many people? 300 million about in US.
And, something that's very high.
Yes, and it's the 4th biggest country in the world. So with they have military bases in all around the world.
70 military bases, something like that.
Yes,
crazy.
so they have a bigger influence in this term for sure. And in terms of player in the EU, like, all this ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, UN, IMF, they are a big player as well, so they can choose where to invest it. So overall, Trump presents a bigger threat. And again, with all the comments towards Iran, all the comments towards India,
He's started problems with India, Trump.
I think he made a few comments, and with Mexico as well. So
yeah, they still got to pay for that wall, man. They still got to pay.
Yeah, with Venezuela again.
Yeah. He's caused some of the problems there. Not all of them. No, he has caused some of them with the sanctions.
Yes.
But Venezuela does have a lot of internal problems as well.
Yes. So yeah, he is a bigger threat in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with you, Paul, because it's not just that he's stacked the courts. He's got a lot of judges who can't do their job properly. He's put Brett Kavanaugh on the bench, which is so annoying because that guy, he's got the most punchable face I've ever seen. And remember that video I sent you, the Samuel Jackson one?
Yes.
He's like, oh, your name is Brett, right? That's such a good video.
Putting not stupid, let's say less...
Incompetent and conservative leaning
yeah.
judges, yes. And you can argue like an ideology difference.
Yes, and it's easy to manipulate them. They don't understand what they have to do, so you just say, this is what I want, and they just say
And
yes.
so he's stacked the courts, and it's not just the Supreme Court as well, it's a lot of the other lower courts, because Obama left, I think it was like 800 judge vacancies or some insane number. Because his assumption was that Clinton would come in and probably resolve some of these issues. Boy, did that not happen. So obviously Trump, that's on domestic stage. He's cutting, what's it called, food stamps to poorer people. He's cut I think it's like if you're unemployed, but if you live in an area with high unemployment, they give you like a waiver, so they say like, okay, it's fine because we get it. He's gotten rid of that, so there's gonna be a lot of poorer people struggling. He's building a goddamn space force. What the hell does that even mean? Did you hear about that? His latest budget bill, he's gonna build the space force.
If we get attacked by aliens.
I'm thinking it's gonna have like basically this guy. You know who Lex Luthor is, right?
Yes.
He's got like a giant sky laser satellite. And I'm thinking like people like China, you wanna mess with me, eh? Watch it. Just take China out.
I mean, it can facilitate the attacks from space.
That's okay. That's like real sci-fi stuff there. It really is. And so, I think Johnson, obviously the stuff with Iran, which slipped my mind momentarily, but he really wants to start a fight with them. North Korea has given them a massive pass, and I think Japan are very worried at the situation. Like, I think the leader, Shinzo Abe, he's like a really nice guy, but I do worry about what they're going to do if North Korea keeps these missile tests. Because obviously Japan don't have nuclear missiles because they're, I think
they can't produce because of the war. Because Germany
something to do with that, and the fact that the US said if anything happens, we'll step in. That's why Trump was saying, they get a free ride because if anything goes wrong, we'll have to step in and protect them. It was like, big man, you agreed to this. Your people agreed to this.
Yeah.
You can't say that. You can't have nukes, but we'll step in and say, oh no, we ain't gonna step in now. You know.
Yeah. And as said, like it comes from Second World War. Germany until now can't produce any weapon.
Okay, so going on to China and soft imperialization of Africa. I watched a documentary about it in first year. It's quite interesting, talking about how, when China does an infrastructure project within an African country, they bring in a lot of Chinese workers. And the signs go up in Mandarin as well, which is really interesting. So what's going on over there?
So China, compared to other powers in the world, like Western world, they know how to create this neo-colonialism very quiet. So, for example, as you said, they go there, they put their people there to work. For example, if it's a oil mine or like minerals, I think one country they work well is Sudan. I think Sudan.
Yeah.
They go there, they construct their own small village. Everyone from China is working there. They take all the oil, they take all the petrol, whatever they want. They bring it back to China.
Because just quickly, I think when Iran sells oil to China, I don't think they actually buy it in money. They trade it with goods. And so that's quite an interesting dynamic as well. Purely because then Iran doesn't get like financial benefit, like direct money, where they can invest it. Instead, it's like a bartering system. Yeah. Where like maybe they'll buy
barter. Yes.
I don't know, Chinese iPhone chargers or something. Yeah. I don't know, but like stuff from China, essentially, manufactured goods. So China make insane amounts of stuff.
Yes.
Like from mobile phones to Barbie dolls to you name it, it's probably made there. USA flags.
Oh, might be.
American flags are made in China now. They make MAGA hats as well. There's Trump MAGA hats are made in China as well. It's like the funniest thing.
But the difference that China has is that, for example, if any, again, Western world with structural adjustment programs and World Bank and IMF, they put conditions and they give loans to the countries and they said open up the frontiers, the customs, so everyone can go and invest.
Sectors, yeah.
So they invest in minerals, they make the money, all the international companies, and all the money go back to the home country.
So which model?
No, but China, They don't put any conditions. They just say, we come, please, we take whatever we want and we go back. So they don't put any sanctions, they don't put any regulations or conditions.
So they take it up front, basically.
Yeah, so they don't come to take everything in an ethical way. They just take it.
So which model do you think is worse? Would you say?
Both are worse for sure.
But like, if I said to you, okay, you got to pick one of these, which one would you say is more problematic?
What we see the situation in the world, the Western one, so far, it's creating many problems, it's creating dependencies, many economies collapsing because of the way it's structured. Chinese one definitely is not ethical as well because they exploit...
They're taking resources.
Yes, they exploit the resources, they don't give anything back
diamonds,
to the country.
oil, Africa is rich with many, many resources. One of the reasons why it was colonized as well for such a long time is that it's full of diamonds.
Yes.
I think, and I was watching one show where they buy a Madagascar mine, and they pay peanuts essentially for the gems that come out of it, and it's hella dangerous in those mines as well, and then it gets shipped off to I think a Western country. I can't remember which one it is, and that's when it gets shaped and refined. And that kind of the point I was meant to ask you about earlier, which it slipped my mind, where in Brazil's class, where the nuts and things like that are picked in Africa, but then they're processed in a country like India, and then they're sold off. And so Africa only gets a small cut of that because the processing is where most of the money is at, if you see what I'm saying. So why is it that NGOs haven't said that, okay, what we'll do is forget India, we'll take them out of the equation, we'll process the things here, we'll build a factory of some sort, and we'll process some of these nuts here, and then we'll sell them off into wherever they go. Why haven't NGOs discussed that with some of these African community leaders or country leaders, whatever? Why do you think that hasn't happened?
Because it's easier to just bribe them. So big companies, they have big influence and they can just give a bit amount of money to the governments, and the government will change even the legislation of the country to make them benefit. So again, it's about people's mentality and the way they can be bribed. So Western countries, they won't bribe anyone in their country, but they know that
corruption is high.
Corruption is, yes, but why? Because people are very vulnerable there. So that's why people still keep getting advantage of Africa. Many countries are just bribed. Many leaders, I mean, and that's why they have the access. One good example was actually Botswana, where they kind of closed up a bit the country and they were processing their own diamonds and exporting them. And maybe it doesn't have the highest GDP in the world, but Botswana is doing well.
It's doing well.
Yeah.
That's something to look out for. Mighty Botswana on the resurgence, because it makes sense. So if you think about if you pick so you go into a diamond mine, you get the diamond, you process everything within Botswana, you've created a lot of jobs within the country, and then you export it.
Yes.
It makes a lot more sense than if you get the valuable thing, because the processing thing can't happen without the raw materials, right? And so rather than if you get the diamond from Madagascar and you ship it off to say England to be cut and shaped very nicely and to be put on a ring if you're a very lucky person, or whatever, tiara, wherever the hell diamonds go, it makes a lot more sense for these countries to do that. But obviously with the way the system works now, it's not in anyone's interest apart from the people of said country to fix the system.
So yes, that's what you said. For them it's easier because bribing them, you give them a bit of money, but the international companies go extract everything and bring back, making much more than if they would work directly with the government in terms of exports. So again, bribery gives them the chance to exploit the diamonds more.
Okay, so another question is, do you think we can stop or cut down radicalization by stopping poverty or cutting poverty? Do you think that's an avenue worth going down?
When I was looking at the question, I actually had a discussion with my friend there, and I said that radicalization definitely will, because radicalization is basically extremism. So if this would be stopped, then definitely it can improve poverty and inequality lines as well. Because usually radicalism or extremism is created and portrayed by media. So people would see the news, in UK, oh, these migrants, they steal our jobs. So that creates hate through the people. And let's say sometimes people that are doing jobs like warehousing, cleaning jobs, so like the lowest paid. Let's say many of them are from like from my side of the world, European Union, and usually if someone is discriminated on media, it means that the discrimination will grow against the population as well. So many people might just get fired, or many people will just
leave.
leave.
Because that happens to people that work with NHS, they get abused.
Yeah, so people just leave, and that's why it's creating poverty. These people would be less likely to get a job.
But I guess that's a separate question, because then you're arguing, the media creating monsters out of some monolithic people and saying that all Eastern Europeans are like this, or a lot of them are like this. My question's more, I guess, geared towards a country like Afghanistan,
Yes.
where a lot of the country are poor.
Yeah.
They have problems, and so do you think that if they weren't as poor as they didn't live within poverty, do you think that would help them to help stop radicalization of these sorts of people? I should clarify, that's what my questions are, because we know that some of the people who joined terrorist groups like ISIS, they're extremely poor and extremely desperate, and some of these people were isolated by the government as well, because I think it was Saddam was the Sunni dictator, and then the Shia Muslims took over, and then they went against the Sunni population, the Shia government, and then yes, because obviously ISIS are a Sunni movement, that creates sort of that radicalization, if that makes sense. And
So
do
you
you think
see, they use religion for that sort of things. So as long as people are, fanatic about something, there always will be extremism. It's just to make clear that ISIS, they said they follow or any other things like that, they follow religion points. Any religion in the world will just teach you don't kill, don't bribe, don't lie, things like that. No one's gonna tell you go and kill. So again, it's how you interpret, how you can brainwash people.
Yes, one of the things I was going to I want to bring up was that some of the fighters were desperately poor, and they just wanted money, and ISIS paid very well compared to the opportunities that were there. Because obviously within a war-torn country, work opportunities are very limited, and obviously they paid well. They gave people houses, they gave them welfare. So do you think that was obviously a big driving factor for people to join the group? Obviously, it doesn't. You can't justify poverty on the radical elements of what some of these people did. Obviously, genocide of the Yazidi people. I think there were genocide of Kurds as well. I'm not saying that if a person's poor, they have an excuse to, or I'm poor, so I'm gonna go genocide people. But if you think that there was more economic stability within these sorts of countries, Iraq, Afghanistan, it would help stop people joining the movement.
Yes. People usually go to do something radical when there is no other way, other means.
We've seen that within, historically within Europe, as the 1930s were very bad economically for many people throughout, not just Europe, but also in America. And we saw the rise of the Nazi Party and the communists in Russia, because one of the things Lenin ran on post World War I was peace, land and bread. It wasn't, he wasn't promoting communism in that moment. He was saying that, look, if you guys support me, I will stop the war with Germany. I will give you guys food, and I'll also give you land. No, it was Lenin.
Lenin died in 24.
Post World War I.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the Treaty of, I can't remember the name. It was a really funny name.
Yeah.
But that's my point. That's what Lenin kind of did. It was one of the things he ran on. Not in an election, obviously, but just to gain support initially.
Yes.
And then obviously you had grain requisitioning during the civil war that ensued within Russia. But my point, going back to the question, is that do you think that if these people had more financial stability within their lives, obviously a terrorist organisation can put a gun to your head and say join us or die. But my point being is that they gained mass movement, mass amounts of people, and we know people left the UK. These people weren't poor. There was one guy from the University of Kent, which is a really good university. He left to join ISIS. So not everyone that is poor will join. But do you think it's a factor within it?
Definitely, because people, as I said, look for stability. That's why they join these groups. These groups promise that we'll get back our territory or whatever and it's gonna be good. Or they bribe people. I'm gonna give you money if you come with me. So again, people, if they're poor, they will definitely go for that. So again, it's I do agree with what you said. Poverty creates radicalization.
Right. This is going on quite long, but a few more questions and we'll just wrap this up. Yeah.
Okay.
Because people don't watch stuff like this long, so I'll cut it up anyways. But like, so there's an immigration problem. So obviously in England, or the UK specifically, there's a housing shortages. People can't, kids are struggling to get places in schools. Doctors were struggling to get doctor's appointments. Hospitals, missing A&E wait times. People typically blame this on immigration, typically now EU immigration, but we know that a certain amount of the NHS are made up by EU migrants. Doctors and nurses come from the EU, and that the EU does have a standardised qualification for nursing, which is pretty cool, I must say. What do you think about this one? Immigration blamed on housing. The fact that there are obviously not just a lot of EU migrants, but also a lot of non-EU migrants that come to the country. How much does immigration play a part into housing shortages and school shortages and that sort of thing?
So it's a good question, because again, more migration means...
It's a very nuanced question as well. There's a lot of stuff in this. It's not just a clear-cut answer.
Yeah. So more migrants coming in, it means more people. So again, that will definitely create more demand for schools, more demand for GP. Again, you can look from two sides. If the country is not investing, if the migrants come and all work, it will create more money for the country, more tax being paid.
And we know that EU migrants pay more into the system than they get out, which is an important point to make as well. That they're not a financial drain. I'm not saying, obviously people are people, right? I'm not saying this to say that you've got anyone has anything to prove here, but it's an important point to make that you can't make the argument that EU migrants are a massive problem to the economy, because in reality they pay more into the system than they actually get out. So to say that they're causing economic problems is a lie. So it's just important to put that out there.
Okay, so you see from this point, if they pay more tax and if this would be invested in schools and education, there won't be this issue.
It should be. Yes, sorry. Yeah, I misheard you for a second. It should be invested into schools and hospitals and training nurses and GPs, because they said that, the Conservatives did say that there are going to be 50,000 more nurses, and another one said there will be 50,000 nurses altogether, but they haven't actually said how they're going to recruit that many. And obviously it takes, I think it's 3 years to become a nurse. 3-4 years. So unless you're going to train 20,000 in the space of a year and 2 years, that's simply not going to happen. And we know that getting nurses from the EU is going to be a problem, because a lot of them have left. Or not a lot of them have left, but some of them are leaving because A, they don't feel welcome here, and B, there's a lot of racial abuse within the NHS, which is probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. That you would racially abuse a nurse or a doctor. Probably one of the dumbest things any human being can do.
You can look at this in two different points. So first, if everyone from Europe is leaving, they can open education opportunities in terms of nurses to people like, I know that people from Philippines and countries like Kenya, Ghana, people come here to learn how to be a nurse. So they can open up the opportunities for these people as well if they would like to recruit international people.
They could already do that. That's the thing.
They do, but just expand to give more places. And this will mean that, because these are international students, they will pay, so the country doesn't really lose. If they would like to recruit people from UK, I see this a bit difficult, because first, UK students have access to grants and the loan, the study loan, and that's how they pay for their education, usually through the loan. International students don't have access to that, so this will come the issue: would the students be keen on paying it by themselves, or does the government have enough money to give the loans in this way to the students? So this comes like the financial issue as well, and again, how many people need to be hired to train them as well?
It's a massive, that's true. That's something I didn't think about. But also the problem that kind of in like an impromptu interview or meeting with some nurses, one nurse was saying that obviously the bursary was cut, that affected her. So she must have been pretty new, even though she looked slightly older. And obviously tuition fees are also affecting her as well. And then Johnson said that they're putting back in the nurse's bursary. So they're basically admitting that they were wrong to cut that in the first place. But also, charging nurses and doctors tuition fees is quite stupid as well, because the impact they're going to have on the economy is massive.
Yes, and there are shortages already.
And so surely that's an incentive to get these people into these fields, so there won't be any tuition fees so long as you finish And then there's also a secondary problem of NHS staff being poached by the countries, like Australia. So like someone trains to be like a nurse or a doctor here, and then they go to Australia. Slick. There's slick guys there.
Maybe to look at how
The
Australia.
contracts are structured. Maybe say that we won't actually pay tuition fees, but we want you to work for the NHS for 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
That would be something far more effective.
Yeah.
Than,
Stability at work.
Yeah.
Security.
Something far more effective than saying that. Okay, we've trained you now, and it's like, all right, cool. I'm going to Australia. Like, but why? And it's like they're going to pay me more because they don't go through the training process.
Yeah.
They save money. So them Australians are very smart. But okay, going back to that, obviously we know the key problem is the UK is not building enough schools, enough hospitals, the infrastructure is poor, it's rubbish, and so realistically it is not the fault of migrants, it's the fault of successive governments of not building enough housing.
Yes, that's true, and another question comes, where then all these taxes go? Where do the money go? Because we see cuts everywhere.
Yeah.
And
well, they'll say it's going to the debt and the deficit.
So yeah, it's going. The economy is definitely going down because we see a lot of companies going away, a lot of companies making
there was,
cuts. So
not a recession, because I think a recession is two successive what's it called, quarters of economic negative growth. Is it? So there was a fears of a recession.
Yeah.
Really big fears. So yeah, it's not looking too positive, but then there's a global slowdown as well. Germany, I think, almost had a technical recession, I think sometime this year. They had an economic slowdown partly because of the stupid tariffs that Trump put on to products, because that guy's a psycho. But yeah, so obviously the more people that come in, you need to build more houses, more schools, you need more teachers, but obviously we haven't put the groundwork in to do that. That's why there are problems here.
Yeah.
And there'll still be massive amounts of people coming in. If it's not from the EU, it'll be from
There will be other countries.
Non-EU countries.
Yes. So the migration took place in this world how many thousands of years, and
non-EU migration is about the same, I think, as EU migration. Anyways, I think it's flip side because there are less EU migrants coming here than there were in previous years, especially pre-Brexit.
There are 3 million EU people in UK, and there are about 2.5 million UK people in EU. So it's kind of both sides.
Oh, yeah, that's quite interesting. Yeah, because there are problems with them, and a lot of the old timers in Spain are going to have some real problems.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see how they voted. But yeah, like I don't know if I sent you the video. I sent it to Clara, where it was basically one guy saying that I didn't think they would end freedom of movement for proper Europeans. Did I send you that one?
No.
Oh man, it was on Channel 4 and it's brilliant. And he was like, they might end pet passports as well. And so the guy was like, he's so arrogant. He was like, I didn't think they would end it for proper Europeans. So I asked Clara, I was like, what do you think he means by proper Europeans?
Yeah.
Like, who the hell are proper Europeans? Like, what does that even mean?
If to look European Union, okay, but by continent we're all Europeans.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
like, is he saying like, yeah, we're going to get rid of like Croatia's freedom of movement rights, but we're going to keep Britain because, yeah, they're so stupid. Like, some of these people are so arrogant, it's unreal. And so I think that answers that question of the immigration problem. It's not really an immigration problem; it's more of a housing and social care problem that's caused by obviously a lot of people coming in, but also a lot of people that are already here. And the fact that the groundwork hasn't been put in to invest into these systems. Because even if we had less EU immigration or immigration overall, in 10 years' time there'll still be a population increase, and so we'd still have these problems.
Yeah, but population is not increasing as much now.
It's not that people having less kids, which is...
Less kids, but it means, baby boomers who were born in
Okay,
40s.
boomer. Have you seen? Okay, boomer. Everyone says, oh, it's so funny. Every time I see someone put that, I just laugh. It's so bad and immature, but it's just great. And so sorry, carry on. Yeah.
No. I'm just saying the age pyramid. It's less youth, more people that are.
More older people. That's the problem in China as well.
Yeah.
The one-child policy.
Yes.
So I think the answer to that question, I think it is down to more a lack of investment rather than just an increase of people. It is two sides to this, but they haven't increased the amount of schools. I think they're struggling to recruit teachers as well. Purely because the teachers, A, they don't get paid enough, and B, they're well overworked, and C, kids are mad disrespectful.
Yes, that's what I've heard. There were a few cases where teachers just jumped over the window, I've heard.
Jumped out the window?
Yeah, or just broke the window to go out of a class, things like that.
Jesus Christ.
I'm not sure. Just I've heard that, but I don't want to believe.
So we've got a few more questions. Wow, this is going on for a while. So, which economic factor should you look at to measure how well a country and its people are doing? So, GDP is one.
Yes.
So, if you say a country's GDP has increased, that generally means the country is doing well.
In terms of economics.
Economics, yeah. Okay.
It's a good thing to look at to
Yeah.
get an overall view. However, I would say if you look at GDP, look at PPP, power parity purchase. Yeah.
Power parity or something like that. No?
Yeah.
So
it means that the GDP is adjusted to the price level of this country. So, for example, let's say bread in UK is £10, then bread in another country, in Bolivia, is £2. However, GDP in UK is 40,000, there is 10,000. It's less, but with that money, they will buy more in Bolivia than they would buy in UK. So it means that the prices are maybe lower, but the standard of life might be not as low as the number is indicating. So that's a bit adjusted. So I'd say to look at that. But there are many other factors and many other measurements to look at. And then one is HDI, Human Development Index, because it has three indicators in total. So GDP, or like the income, is one. Life expectancy is another one, and after that they have the literacy rate, which helps to look at the social side as well, which is really important and tells how developed the country is. So let's say a country that's not very high in GDP, Cuba, it's I think in 50 something place like that for HDI. Again, they don't have high GDP, but they have high life expectancy compared to...
They have a lot of doctors in Cuba.
Yes.
There's a lot of doctors
And
there.
education.
So, I was talking to my dad about it, they have really bad cars. And they still have horse wagons.
Oh, you see, they're stuck in time. So, but again, that's...
The sanctions, part of that is down to the sanctions and the US not wanting to deal with them. I think Cuban cigars, they were sanctioned for a long time, which is hilarious. But yeah, so you got any other economic factors worth looking out for, like median income or income inequality?
Income inequality, definitely. It tells, because again, going to GDP, if the income inequality is high, it means that many people are poor, getting less money, and just a few are very rich.
Also, the factors that kind of some people put out are, GDP being a really important one, are the unemployment rate and the stock market. So, what do you think the pros and cons of looking at those three things are?
So unemployment, definitely, because if many people are without jobs, it means that they don't get an income. But again, if the social system is working and people that are unemployed get some money, this is a bit better. So social side is important.
So, but what about, say, if unemployment has been lower historically, but the economy's still done well because before in households you don't need two parents or two people to work in the same household. One person not working, so technically that person's unemployed, but because the other person is making enough money, they don't they don't have to be employed. That makes sense. So you can say that unemployment was higher in historic periods, but because the economy was doing so well and people's wages were so well compared to the cost of living, you didn't need to work. If you see what I'm saying, one person didn't need to work, or they only had to work part time. So in that case, surely unemployment is not the best metric to look at if you think about those sorts of things.
Yeah, might be, but I would say nowadays it plays a role. Because mostly both people work.
Most people work, yeah, because they have to, because the economy is clearly not the best.
Yes, and the way that the social life is now. So, for example, in Western world, all the equality and among the gender, like man, woman, everyone is working.
Women aren't expected to stay at home as much anymore. That stereotype is slowly dying, thankfully. So what's it on the stock market? That's one Trump's always touting, but then he never talks about when the stock market is low. Is that metric worth looking at?
Stock market, yes, you can see how much does a share is worth of any company in your country. So let's say if your country's companies are have a high price for the share, it means that they're doing well. If the share goes down, it means that maybe the country doesn't have that much demand, maybe they don't make that much money, so they need it means something is going wrong, yes, with the economy.
So is that one worth looking at, or do you think?
I won't really look at that one. I would prefer unemployment.
Unemployment?
Yes,
okay.
Not prefer, but...
I can't remember what the third one was. No, that was all three of them, wasn't it?
Yeah.
GDP, unemployment, and stock market. So...
Happiness index. Let people see...
Big up Norway, happiest country going.
Yes.
Or I think it might be Finland. I can't remember which one it is. They rotate, you know.
Yes, it's one of them, but basically they look at how happy people
But
are.
they don't want the other country to be upset, so they let them
Yeah,
take
yeah,
the
and
lead.
it's interesting to see some countries that we perceive as poor being in the top.
There was a UFC belt where they made it like the baddest guy belt, and
Yes.
there's some other guy saying we should have a nice guy belt, and one guy saying, look, you know, if we ever do this, yeah, I'll hold the door open for you.
Yeah.
So as I say, like, they let each other rotate to keep each other happy, but
Yes.
it just depends. I think on certain days when you talk to certain people, how happy they are.
Yes, and because poor might be that you're not, but you're happy. So what we
Yeah,
perceive
that's
poor
true.
might be different to
That's
people in that
a thing
country.
where Western countries suicide rates are very high, but in some of the poorer countries, you know, GDP wise,
Yeah.
suicide rates are much lower.
Yes.
Because they're much more satisfied with life. Because obviously life isn't just about money; it's about personal fulfillment.
Yes. Yes.
And so maybe they feel that more. There's less pressure, maybe,
Yes.
societally, or for whatever reason. I don't want to put anyone down, but you know, living in a country where there's less societal pressure is a lot easier than living in one where there's a massive societal pressure on,
Yes.
you know, doing things at certain times. You know, my mum talking to me about getting married, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, there's societal pressure, you know, and that's not that much stress on you. It happens all the time, which
Yeah.
thankfully it doesn't. But you
Yes.
know, if you're lucky enough to have such a parent, I'm sorry. So, final serious question: nationalization versus privatization. Do you think that you know you have to have both or one or the other? Because there's always the argument that, you know, if you give it to the private sector, you know, there's a guy, Dave Rubin, he's saying that competition will kick in and, you know, people will compete with each other and it'll bring the prices down, etc. This is something we haven't seen in
Yeah.
the price of trains because there are not 4 companies and it's terrible. But yeah, what are your thoughts on privatization?
So I'll go first with two examples. First would be communist times and everything nationalized. It's good. You know, the government definitely gets the money for tax. Everything's going to be invested in. There will be infrastructure. There will be health, education, financial system. There will be all the utilities like water going on, gas, electricity. So definitely people are with that. However, if the government owns the media as well, again, it's going to be very well brainwashed. And people will be controlled what they use. Example of China, social media, everything, all the comments.
Yeah, it goes through WeChat. They have like
there is a
everything.
filter that government
And
sees.
they have a social thing, isn't it? So like, if you drink a beer in public, your social standing goes down on the algorithm or something like that. No, it's crazy, yeah.
So you see that is a bit because it's helping overall, but individual freedom is definitely not there, and
So-
people don't have opinion.
So if we look at, say, the key industries, so we talk about water, gas, electricity.
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
Oh, okay.
With the
Yeah,
examples.
sorry. Okay, yeah, you carry on then. So if we leave the media out this one, just we'll go
yeah.
for this industry. Okay.
If you go on the other side where everything is free, so after the crisis, Ghana, education, health, gas, water, everything got privatized. Before that, after independence, the country was doing well because it was a lot of social investment, free education, free health, free transport as well as I know. So, you know, this would stimulate the economy and people living there to do stuff. But after everything gets privatized, you need to make sure that you have enough money for education, that you have money for health, that you have money for transport, for everything. So again, when everything is privatized, it can create monopoly, and sometimes it will lead to poverty.
Or like competition and stuff, bro. What was the? Because we have that problem in this country where if you're a franchise system, like with the trains and the
Yes.
buses, these companies do really have a monopoly. You know, East Midlands Trains,
Yes.
I think it's called now. They have a real monopoly on trains that come through the area. Virgin Trains, and I think it's cross country is a third one. But they have a massive monopoly on train lines because
Yes.
there is no competition. There is no incentive to compete with each other. For one thing, and like I don't think Virgin Trains even come to Northampton. They pass through. They don't.
They pass through, yeah.
But they don't even. So it's just one company because they buy the franchise and they can set a price. And we know that with I think it's called East Coast Maidlands, where Virgin and Stagecoach pulled out. Is run by essentially the government or like a government agency, and they ran it really well. And then the government were like, oh hell no, we got to privatise this quick. And so it can work in certain industries, and like it feels like we've gone to the crony capitalist model. Because if you look at the price of plane tickets are quite cheap. If you can get really good deals on, but with trains you can't do that because there's a more of a monopoly.
Yeah, so that was where you're going, like my point to go through, I think. a mixed economy, Keynesian economy would
There's
work.
that man again.
Yes, Keynes. So yeah, I think things like that everyone needs, and everyone needs access to water, education, health, gas, electricity. These have to be nationalized and controlled by the government, but there has to be individual freedom. So let's say other things like hospitality industry, technological industry, all these other industries, they have to be controlled privately by people, because it's about people preferences, it's about people's power as well, and it gives people freedom to choose what they want to do. And again, as I said, media is a very big thing nowadays, and privatized, it's maybe good, but it has to be how do you call it, checked what is there. Yeah, and competition, it has to be...
There have to be many companies competing.
Yes.
You have to have competition. Like if you look at the UK model at the moment, there's not really a lot of companies. Like I watched Watchdog, the show, on BBC a few years ago, and they talk about gas and electricity prices, where most companies charge the exact same rate. So where's the competition? No one's competing with each other. There's no incentive to do it.
That's correct.
The internet companies, there's only two really good ones, Virgin Media and BT, and they're both pretty similar. So I think if there's not enough companies to compete with each other, it doesn't work. Privatization doesn't work, because if there's no competition, they charge you a monopoly, and they've got to make money for shareholders.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do if you've got a monopoly on the market, or a duopoly?
Yeah.
You can do what you wish.
Yes,
So,
because you just set the price between you two or three. So
and you don't have to negotiate price. We saw that with RAM prices. So the computer part.
yeah.
And so what happened was they didn't negotiate with each other. They just set the price high, all three of them.
Yeah.
Not simultaneously, but pretty similar times.
Mm-hmm.
And so when was RAM prices globally went up.
Yeah.
Because they have not as a triopoly. It's not a word, but three companies.
Yeah.
So it can work, but we're going to wrap it here because I really have to pee. So yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Gheorghia, for coming on. Hopefully you'll be a guest on another time.
Thank you very much as well for the
And
experience.
so, yeah, if you got any questions you want to ask for next time, put it in the comments, and we'll leave it now. So
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.